Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the SH Monsterarts Anguirus 1972. Now, this version of Anguirus comes from the 1972 film Godzilla vs. Gigan, which I like enough. Godzilla vs. Gigan was the first ever Showa-era Godzilla movie that I've ever watched, so I do have a little bit of a personal connection with this movie. But as far as my thoughts, as a whole go, now, in 2026, again, I think it's an alright movie. I wouldn't put it as high as other Showa-era movies, I mean, obviously, the original 1954 film, that one is just my favorite Godzilla movie of all time, and my second favorite movie, period, of all time. I prefer Mothra vs. Godzilla, and even Terror of Mechagodzilla, I think, is a much better film. But overall, Godzilla vs. Gigan, I like it. There is way too much stock footage in this movie. It gets to a point where the movie starts to drag on because of it. It's not like with All Monsters Attack, where, yeah, that movie uses a lot of stock footage too, but, at least the runtime is, really short. It's only, an hour and 10 minutes. Godzilla vs. Gigan, I think, is, an hour and a half, and a lot of that, well, not a lot of it, but, a good chunk of it is just, stock footage from older movies. When you start to see, Mothra show up in certain shots, you know you have a problem, but I digress. I've been rambling on for far too long. Let's just get into this. Like usual, to start, we'll take a look at the paint, and the painting on this figure is interesting. So right off the bat, you can see that Anguirus here, most of the parts here, are going to be casted in this reddish-brownish coloration, which doesn't look bad in itself. It's just not entirely accurate. When you go back and watch Godzilla vs. Gigan, you can see that Anguirus is just straight up brown, where here he has that reddish finish to him, which doesn't look bad, it's just inaccurate. And I personally would have preferred accuracy, but I digress. All the spikes on this figure, like his tail, his carapace, back of his head, his horn, the spikes on his limbs, and even his teeth are going to be painted this nice yellowish-whitish coloration. The nails here are going to be painted white with a nice glossy finish to them. And I really like how the brown sort of eases into the white here. That also looks really nice. Going to the head here, we can see that the eyes are going to have a green finish to them, which also isn't entirely accurate, but I digress. And lastly, the inside of the mouth here is going to be painted red with a nice glossy finish. And that's pretty much it for the painting on this figure. And again, the painting here, it's not bad. The paint is applied really nicely here, but again, I just would have preferred accuracy. If we got something closer to the movie Monster Series Anguirus 1972 that we got in that Dream 5 box set last year, that'd be great. But as is, it still looks good, but I would have preferred accuracy. So overall, I'd say the painting on this figure gets 3/4 of a pass. You might say I'm being petty, but just wait till we talk about the prices. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation. And the articulation on this figure is, well, let's take a closer look. So right off the bat, going to the jaw here, we can see that it opens about that much, which, I'm not going to lie, that is pretty disappointing. Especially when the promo images show the mouth being able to open much wider, but this is about as far I can get without the jaw popping off. So, yeah, that's a little disappointing. We have a ball joint at the base of the head here. A very limited ball joint at the center of the neck, and a ball joint at the base of the neck. The waist here is on a ball joint, but mine is noticeably loose, which is a little disappointing. The shoulders here are on ball joints. And we have a bend, like so. The wrist, paw, whatever you want to call these, so from what I've seen, these are kind of designed kind of weirdly. This is a weird mix between a ball joint and a hinge joint. So moving the paws or whatever you want to call these, it's a little weird, but still there is articulation there. The hind limbs are on ball joints as well, and are very loose on mine. You know, like, yeah, just no effort at all, which is very, very upsetting. You know, so it's kind of, it is noticeably hard to, you know, get this guy on all fours, you know. Again, especially compared to the promo images where, like, he looks like proper Anguirus, but I kind of struggle to do that. I don't know if that's just a skill issue or what, but either way, the joints here, I think, should have been a lot tighter. We do have a bend in the knee here. The ankles here are on ball joints. And we have a little bit of articulation in the toes here. All of the toes here are on a ball joint, which is nice. And lastly, we have the tail, which is just a whole lot of ball joints. You know, not a lot of, like, range of motion here, so you can't really get Anguirus to do the stuff he did in the Pipeworks games. That's the closest you can get, but still, there is articulation here, and it is nice. You know, this joint is a little loose here, but everything else is pretty solid. So that's pretty much it for the articulation on this figure. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. You know, I wish there was more articulation in the tail and in the jaw, and I wish, like, some of the joints weren't as loose as they are. So, unfortunately, I don't know if it's just my copy, you know, like, I might have just gotten a bad copy, whereas other people might have gotten, like, you know, better, like, you know, more sturdier joints, but at least for my copy, I'm going to say the articulation gets, I'm going to say it gets, like, half a pass, you know, like, the loose joints, and I don't know, I think the articulation could have been handled a little better here, but I digress. So, believe it or not, this figure actually does come with accessories. The way this figure handles said accessories is interesting. So, for context, in Godzilla vs. Gigan, there are scenes where Godzilla and Anguirus are communicating with each other, but to display this for the viewer, they use speech bubbles, which, you know, does play into the whole, like, you know, comic book, like, artistry thing that the film has going on, which I think that's cool. And they actually did include that here. Just not as, like, proper accessories, you know? What they did was they just, they printed the speech bubbles on the inside of, like, the flap of, like, the packaging. So you actually have to cut apart the packaging in order to use these accessories, which, for a figure that's expensive like this, that's kind of absurd, right? Like, there are, like, other figures in the past that have done that, you know, not specifically with the SH Monsterarts line. In 2009, Hasbro, they made a repaint slash retool of the Bull T-Rex from the Lost World Jurassic Park, and that figure had it to where, like, you know, had, like, you know, cutout thing where you could cut out, like, the Ford Explorer, which was really cool, you know, like, it's a children's toy, so, like, you know, something like that, you know, that's neat. This is not a children's toy. Again, this is a $140 adult collectible, and they expect you to just cut open the packaging like that. And if you mess up, well, like, if you accidentally cut something, like you accidentally cut too much off or something, then, oh well, guess you gotta just buy a new one. Now, that is a little extreme. You know, I'm sure you could, like, print out, like, other, like, you know, other, like, speech bubbles, you know, similar to what the box includes, but they should have just been acrylic stands, especially for the price, but I digress. You know, this isn't really just me talking about this is more of just a tangent, but yeah, that could have been handled much better. Again, especially for the price tag, but more on that at the end of this video. Now, we'll take a look at the sculpt, and the sculpting on this figure is actually really nice. This is actually pretty spot on to what we've seen in all of the Showa-era Godzilla movies that features Anguirus, you know, because this suit, they didn't just use for, you know, Godzilla vs. Gigan. This suit originally debuted in Destroy All Monsters. It was used again in, you know, Godzilla vs. Gigan. Had a very brief cameo in Godzilla vs. Megalon, and of course, it was in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. So they did use this suit quite a bit, you know. And to be fair, it is a really nice, like, design, so I can see why they would go for that. You know, like, reuse the suit. Well, It was also cheaper than making a new one, but I digress. Regardless, though, the sculpting here is still very nice and is still very close to what we've seen in all of those movies. So the sculpting here, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing, and the detailing on this figure is very nice, so let's take a closer look. So starting off at the head here, we can see all the scales and everything are detailed very nicely. Everything here is very nicely defined, and we get that same articulation going down the neck here. All the creases and all the scales and everything are detailed very nicely, and we get more of that on the underside here, which again looks really nice. Going to the limbs here, again, just a lot of really nice scaling and just all the creases and everything. Again, just looks really nice. Everything here is defined very nicely. You know, the carapace here has a lot of really nice detailing as well. And going to the tail here, again, just a lot of really nice creases, a lot of really nice scaling, and all like the spikes and everything are detailed very nicely. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the detailing on this figure. And yeah, the detailing on this figure I think is very nice. So the detailing here, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons. To start, here we have the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1972. Here we have the SH Monsterarts Gigan 1972. And of course, to complete this 1972 lineup, here we have the movie monster series Anguirus 1972. And in case you're wondering, no, I am not going to spend $300 on the SH Monsterarts King Ghidorah 1972. I want to keep my kidneys, thanks. And of course, here we have some hand sanitizer. Here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? I'm not going to lie, I'm a little disappointed with this figure. I will say, the sculpt and detailing here I think looks really nice. It's just the paint, while it doesn't look bad, it's not accurate, and I would have preferred accuracy. Also, the articulation here is also pretty disappointing. I wish the jaws opened wider. I wish there was more range of movement in the tail. And also, some of the joints here are just way too loose, like to the point where it's like actually kind of hard to pose this figure. And also, just the way they handled the speech bubbles, like making them like attached to the packaging to where like you have to like, you know, cut the box apart. Like that's also just kind of bad design on Bandai's part. And overall, this figure does just kind of drop the ball in multiple different ways, which is a shame. You know, because I really wanted to like this figure. Apart from Godzilla, of course, Anguirus is my favorite monster in the Godzilla series. I love Anguirus so much, and when they announced this figure, I was ecstatic. Finally, an SH Monsterarts Anguirus figure. And then this figure comes out, and again, it just has like a bunch of like weird like issues with like the articulation and stuff like that, and it's like, why does it have to be like that? You know, I really wanted to like this figure, but again, this figure, it just did a lot of things that I wasn't a big fan of, especially for that price tag. So, MSRP for this figure is $140. I actually paid like almost double that for this figure because I originally pre-ordered this guy from Awesome Collector, right? But months went by, Awesome Collector, I have had no updates since, you know, I ordered from there. And this figure came out in June, by the way. And I just got this figure like a couple weeks ago because, again, like Awesome Collector just like they weren't getting it in stock. And if you look at Awesome Collector's website now, it looks like they're just selling off everything they have in their warehouse. So maybe I think you know, I don't know what's going on. They haven't really made a statement on what's going on, but like, you know, whatever's going on at Awesome Collector, like I'm sure there's like a lot going on. But yeah, so I spent the $120 there and I couldn't cancel. So I tried canceling something in the past, you know, something I ordered, and they just didn't. You know, they just, you know, I emailed like, hey, how do I cancel this order? And they just straight up said, oh, we don't do those anymore. Like once you order something, like that's like you're stuck with it, which cool. You know, so I couldn't cancel my order there. So I ended up just getting this guy from Big Bad Toy Store. and I paid $140. So in total, I paid $260 for this figure. Yeah, definitely don't do that. And even 140, I think, is a bit much. When I reviewed the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1954, I was complaining about how the price went from $70 to $80 to $90, or however much that reissue was at the time. And someone very politely mentioned, well, Zach, you got to take into consideration that, like, inflation's a thing, you know? So, like, the economy now is different than the economy from when the figure first came out, which, you know what? Fair. You know what? I'm not going to argue with you. That is a fair point. But how is this figure $140? That is insane to me. This should be like $90, maybe $100, not $140. And before you mention the tariffs, the price for this figure was determined before the tariffs were even a thing. Right, so I don't want to hear that as an excuse either. And yeah, overall, this figure, it's not awful. It's not the worst figure I've ever talked about on this channel, but it's definitely a disappointing one, but I digress. Anyway, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.